Welcome back to Natural 2, our D&D and tabletop role-playing talk show slash podcast. And today we are doing, I guess, the second part of our scenario writing yourself into a corner challenge, where we find situations that you would commonly run into as a DM in a D&D game, and then trying to answer those scenarios or find ways out of those sticky situations without, I guess, looking like an imbecile. So I will put mine forward first, but James, do you have any opening thoughts before we get into it, sir?
Just that these are fun, and I feel like it's almost a break in a way from the string of like serious topics that we've had. So it is the DM challenge, the sequel.
Yeah, and I would recommend to anybody who DMs fairly frequently to kind of do this to yourself. That's a weird way of putting it. But if you see posts, you know, on Reddit or whatever forums you browse about like, oh, I found myself in this situation, put your party in that situation and try and run through it, because all it will ever do is help prepare you to think on your feet when you actually run into a similar situation. And also it is fun, because that's one of the things I really do enjoy about being a DM, is taking the nonsense that keeps coming my way, crafting it into some sort of coherent plot, and then throwing it back to the party. But I will go ahead and explain my scenario to you, sir. It's a little vague, so again, feel free to ask clarifying questions, but you know, standard adventuring party, we'll go with like 4 people, whatever classes, all that stuff's pretty irrelevant. At the end of an arc, they've been working very closely with this NPC ally for some time. They're in this kind of like large city. You can kind of picture like Waterdeep is a very generic background to put this in. For whatever reason, this NPC ally has murdered kind of the antagonist or the big bad evil guy. But the party, the actual players, elect to take the fall for him legally. So now the party is believed to be murderers, and it's also kind of like non-arguable. Like they found, you know, red-handed, blood on their hands. So it's like everybody assumes the party has murdered this person. They're taking the fall for it. So now they are in prison, but I guess the double-edged sword, or the problem to solve, is there is a time-sensitive mission or end quest that they're working on outside of the city while they are currently in prison. And you could make this timeline kind of whatever you want. It could be like by the end of the day or by a week. The issue is that they are very much stuck here for legal reasons and I guess like world reasons, and they have to be there. And what are some of the creative ways to work around that? And again, it's very vague, but that's the general situation you find yourself in.
So they're, just to restate this to make sure I understand, their NPC buddy that they like killed the villain in cold blood or in unfortunate circumstances, whatever. And so they've decided to take the rap for their friend, and they're being found guilty as a foregone conclusion.
Yes.
All right. So the first thing that pops into my head, and again, first idea, best idea. That's I try to stick to that, even if doesn't end up actually being true. I would set up a meeting, like those jailhouse meetings in crime dramas, right? Where there's a room and the guards by the door frowning and, you know, no touching and whatever else, with the NPC and maybe some other friends or allies that they've made who know what the deal is, who know what the score is. And I'm assuming that the NPC has some muscle, some juice, if he was able to kill the villain. And isn't just like a milkmaid that got lucky. So while they're in prison, we're gonna put that on the back burner. We're gonna deal with them being in prison later. As a way to repay the favor that has been done for them, the NPC is gonna get a gang together to Ocean's 11, whatever this other quest is, and say, okay, you helped me, now I'm gonna help you. And then the players play those other characters going to solve that mission Uh, and then when that's over, we come back to the prison plot.
Yeah, that honestly is a really similar conclusion that I had. The other little twist I thought could be interesting, and a lot of this depends on your players and like what they like to do, because some parties will just not want to play different characters, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, another fun one was you play the team that breaks the party out of prison. So you like plan a heist to save your main characters and then continue once they get out. Kind of the same vibe, but different approach. The other idea that I had that again depends a lot on like kind of the theme of your campaign or like generally what your players enjoy is you could almost create some sort of like crime scene detective trial drama, and that like the party have to navigate this more like kind of web
Giant
of
social encounter.
yeah, and so it's not like bouncing from combat to combat, but trying to find this loophole or prove this point or expose this conspiracy or whatever, which could be interesting, or some people find that bland, but I don't think that's a problem that is difficult to overcome. I think what's interesting about that problem is the variety of ways you can approach that. The very simple one that I think is the kind of the most generic is whatever entity has them imprisoned, the government or the police or the lord or the king or whatever, goes, oh, you do need to get this quest done. You've expressed its importance to me. I'll send you with a guard or a guide or some sort of like ankle monitor or something, and you go do it and then come back and we'll deal with your prison thing. Like that's like probably the easiest way, but less, I guess, interesting or substantial. But yeah, that was my little brain teaser. Nothing too extreme, but yeah.
I think another way you could go with that is to mirror real life and just have someone with a lot of money and resources come in and nullify the justice system, and say, I'm going to solve this problem for you. I'm just going to make this go away because I've got judges that owe me favors. I've got money I can pay people off. I can hire the very best solicitor in the city, drown them in paperwork, whatever I have to do. But then you're going to owe me.
Yep. Yeah. That could be a good one too.
Because I, Mr. Rich Person, see the utility of having this team of highly capable individuals that happens to owe me basically their lives.
And you know what parties love more than anything is owing some NPC above them a favor. They just eat that shit up. It's their favorite thing.
And you've set it there again. You've set it up for a couple of satisfying conclusions. Either they can find a good reason to turn on this person later, or maybe find out like, oh, okay, he's like Samuel L. Jackson from S.H.I.E.L.D. and this isn't so bad after all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was a good spectrum of answers. So
mine for you, pretty different and also very open-ended, very vague. You have a player who's not a problem player. He's good. He's not an RPG horror story, so we're not going in that direction, right? You have a good relationship and good communication with this player. But their character has fallen in love with an NPC. And the player is intrigued by the idea of an in-character love story. And we're not even going to worry about like, oh, not safe for work, fade to black, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're not talking about that kind of fantasy. We're not talking about that kind of wish fulfillment. Again, not RPG horror story. What do you do?
Oh, that's the whole problem?
That's it. Because I think a lot of DMs would be like, I can't do that. I'm not capable. It's too weird. Not going to do it.
What I would do personally and what I would advise are slightly different. So I'll go over what I would do personally first. I thoroughly enjoy the practice of like trying to get into the mindset of a character or a human being, quote unquote, that isn't me. I really enjoy that. That's like a challenge for me. And so in our game, there's been a few times where I've had to like play your sister or play someone who is vaguely interested in courting you. And that's strange because, you know, despite your good looks, James, I'm not interested in courting you. But so I would almost kind of get excited by that problem, and not in a weird way, not in some sort of other wish fulfillment fantasy, but just if they are a decent player and I don't have any problems with them and they, you know, put in the legwork, I would just work with them closely to get the proper response or to have a proper understanding, and then just honestly have some fun with it. And, you know, worst case scenario, killing a loved one for some, you know, quest hooks, always fun. As far as what I would actually recommend to people who don't have this weird, I don't know, twisted enjoyment of torturing themselves with other people, I would be very clear with the player where your threshold is, where you are going to figure this out outside of the session by yourself, and this is what we're going to actually showcase in our game and during the sessions and like in our lore or our story. Where I guess the example I would put forward is like, you know, obviously having a conversation with this person or this NPC is going to be in, but I'm not interested in role playing out this like 10-minute session of you guys going on like a boat tour of the Swan Lake and that kind of thing. And then I think it's really is that simple, where you then tell the player anything past that, I am totally cool with you kind of almost telling me what happens or what you want to happen or what you picture happening, and then just continuing as normal. And I think that the best outcome or the only outcome of that situation is the player's more involved in the game as a whole, because now there's like a deeper connection to some NPC in the world that they're constantly thinking about and trying to work with. And that hopefully leads into them being a better player or a better RPer or feeling more emotionally involved or whatever you want to say. So yeah, I wouldn't even potentially state that as a problem. I would kind of, I think that'd be cool. So
I think it's something that I don't see that coming up a lot, except in the horror stories way.
mhm.
The in character, you know, inter character romance or affection. It's all very D&D stories are very platonic, aren't they? Uh, it's just stories about bunches of friends, and I don't think I don't think there's a lot of verisimilitude in that. I like what you said about that maybe that player just can decide what happens sometimes. I think that that's a good way to approach it. I think the way that I would handle it in general terms is to get the roots, get the meat of this relationship off the table.
Mhm.
And I don't mean off the table metaphorically. I mean like away from the gaming table.
Mhm.
So if the player wants to say that, oh, these characters went on a date or whatever, then you could say, well, okay, fine. You can tell me
Mhm.
what happened on the date. And I'm just going to give you like some guidelines here. Give me one thing that went wrong, what you did about it. And, you know, here's other things that maybe definitely would not happen, or whatever other guardrails are going to keep this where you want it.
Mhm.
And then let the player run with it from there. Another alternative is to put a lot of this relationship in the sort of third person. So I'll start having interaction happening with letters, notes, like something where you as the DM can just give them a letter instead of having to sit there and role play a romantic conversation.
Mhm.
I think that's going to keep it from getting stupid and goofy. You know, keep the teehees to a minimum, while and give the interaction a chance to be creative and have some depth and add something to the story besides, you know, the bard seduced the dragon.
Mhm. I think the other important thing to mention about this, as the DM, you have full authority of where this starts and where it stops. You can say, I don't want to receive some 400-page document of this, like, erotica you wrote about this NPC in my game. Like, you can set that limit, and you can also find yourself regulating your own behavior as well, right? Like if you find yourself in a situation where a player expresses they want to have a like vaguely romantic relationship with an NPC, make sure that you don't then take that and run further than they would like it. Really what it comes down to, and we've talked about this endlessly, is open and clear communication. And if even this topic makes you uneasy, I think the answer is very simple. You just go, I don't want that to be part of the story. I don't think I can handle that. I also don't want that. Let's just leave it be. And if they're a friend and a decent player, they'll just go, all right, and move on. But yeah, you are in full control, and just remember that.
Anyway, on to the next one.
Okay, so we're going to do a community one that I've pulled from Reddit.
See, I didn't know his scenario. He didn't know mine. We are doing genuine responses, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, so what I think this boils down to, and potentially you can give me more details when you're done reading, the DM appears to have a kind of clearly defined point A, B, C, like his story, this happens, and then this causes this to happen, and this causes this to happen, which I would already kind of state that if you're in that mindset as a DM, you might want to try and loosen that up a bit. But the TLDR is there is some MacGuffin, as he refers to, that they have acquired, and the party became very suspicious of it because it is incredibly powerful, way beyond their means. So they assumed that some other entity or some other organization was going to want it, which they assumed correctly, and they went out of their way as players to safeguard and protect this MacGuffin, where the DM had planned that once the party returned to town, the enemies or the antagonists discover the MacGuffin, and that causes the drama that then leads into whatever story he had. So the issue lies in the party has put in significant effort and genuine, I guess, intelligence in hiding this MacGuffin and kind of figuring out what's about to happen, and the DM doesn't want to crush that because he wants to, say, good job, you guys actually put effort into this, but he wants to also tell the story that he prepared that he thinks he can't do without the evil people discovering they have this device. That's the general gist that I took away from it.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to poo-poo anybody's work out there. Not really, because I think all DMs do it. Mm-hmm. But just be mindful of this kind of problem where it's like, oh, the party is definitely going to do this, and then that's going to happen. Nah, man, mm-hmm. that is a tale as old as D&D. You really at least should think about what you'll do if they don't. Mm-hmm. Start thinking about it as soon as you have that idea. Like, well, I hope they'll do XYZ, but if they don't, always, get into the habit of making that kind of plan, mm-hmm. because parties will always surprise you, and they'll always take left turns. Having said that, the way that I would go about this is if the game absolutely cannot, like if the main plot absolutely cannot proceed without this item being discovered by the villains, there are three ways that immediately come to mind that I would consider handling this. The first is that if it's obviously a magical artifact. And so much like the Ring of Power in the Lord of the Rings, either it has a will that is making it problematic for the party to just hide it away, or other individuals of power can sense its presence in a vague way. So you can hide it to buy yourself time, but if you're not on the move, eventually somebody's going to sniff it out. just because it's so powerful and has this aura. And besides that, detect magic is a thing already, you know. And if this thing is a powerful artifact, then any spellcaster in your world that can cast detect magic might see this thing glowing like a bonfire, you know, unless the PCs really just encase it in double layers of lead or something and really,
Bag of
really,
holding,
really
case of lead, teleport to a
right.
different plane. Yeah.
So there, you know, it wouldn't be easy to keep a powerful magic item secret. And in fact, if this is a low level party, they don't have that many resources. They're just not going to have the resources to do it, in my opinion. If you're talking about powerful antagonists with resources, they're going to have detect magic, they're going to have divination, or they might just have the mystical magical scent of this thing and are just drawn to its power. The second possibility, and probably my least favorite of the three, so it's weird to put them in this order, but you'll get over it, is that they they either purposefully or accidentally have an NPC that finds out about this thing in their possession that betrays them. But I feel like being betrayed by a trusted NPC is something you only get to do once in your entire campaign. And for the next like 18 months after that, every NPC they meet, they're going to be like, ah. So I don't actually recommend it unless you really, you know, really have put the effort in to be creative about it or to earn it, so to speak. And the final option that occurs to me is to put that main narrative on hold, put it on the back burner. You know, are they? The party will eventually relax. They will hide this thing. They will put it somewhere where they think it's safe, or they'll think they have solved that problem. Take them on some side quests. Let them go on some side quests. And about the time they've kind of forgotten about it, oopsie, something happened, you know, wherever you hid it was compromised, or whatever you hidden it in got broken into. You know, if you allow them the time, they'll make a mistake. So unless you just absolutely have to push forward with this story, just wait. They'll hang themselves. The party, you know, the party is their own worst enemy most of the time. You can use that. So those are the three options that occur to me. What do you think?
The second one that you mentioned, I kind of had a similar thought, but I think there's a better way of approaching it, where instead of assuming again that some NPC has interacted with them or helped them find this thing or knows about this thing, instead of having them betray them, you could have them like forced to betray the party, where like maybe the antagonist holds some leverage over them, and then it's not a matter of this favorite NPC just outright betraying them. It's just kind of like tragic, like, I tried my best, but they have my wife kind of thing, which still allows the party to enjoy this character while also suffering the consequences of being betrayed. But they still might not like him, but that's, you know, a whole other issue. The other way I would bring this up, and kind of the same approach but less specific, is I'm also assuming the antagonists know that either the MacGuffin has been retrieved and they don't know who has it, or they know that it's in their general area. Like that's like some assumptions, but I don't think that's too far of a leap to make. If that's the case, then maybe the antagonists start roughing people up, killing whole villages, you know, going after innocents, just kind of shotgun approaching things, assuming that your party is generally good guys, knowing that they will start feeling the moral burden of keeping this thing safe that is causing other people harm. And you can just kind of keep pushing that until the party's like, damn, they're like, we gotta do something. And it's not even that they have to hand over the MacGuffin, but maybe they start trying to get in the way of the antagonist, which then the antagonist can put two and two together and figure out they have it. I think the main thing out of all of these is you do want to make sure that the party doesn't feel like, oh, no matter what we do, we're just going to end up where the DM wants us. So, like, you don't want to just shatter the preparations they've made. You don't want to subvert them with like, they had a tracker on you the whole time. Like, you want to really make sure that their efforts are rewarded and that it shows in not only the story, but I guess like the world at large. So that would just generally be the things I would look out for, or at least like put a filter on with any idea that I put forward. But I kind of liked the them just kind of like brutalizing people until the party gives. That feels very, evil guy kind of vibe for me, which maybe doesn't fit this specific, baddie organization or individual. But I think that would certainly work with at least our party, because they do not stand for other people doing cool shit. They're the ones who do cool shit. So
I think that this is a great time to mention how I think that you can avoid as a DM making the group feel robbed, and that the number one way is to take your time. Where that feeling is coming from is if you drop it on them with no explanation or no foreshadowing. But if you build up to it, or if you start sending those signals or those hints, so instead of the party getting back to town and somebody just walks up to him on the street and says, "You've got the MacGuffin," they can get back to town, go sit in the tavern, and they can hear an old man talking at the bar, and he says that, "Have you heard? They said the seal on the tomb of Orgoth was broken. What do you think was even down there? That thing's been sealed since before I was born." So now, you're showing instead of telling, that their actions did not take place in a vacuum. And especially if they're a low-level party, if they knew this thing was there, or if they were able to get to wherever this thing was, then it's reasonable that others would have some inkling of some knowledge, so that it's not just an airtight situation that, nothing will ever happen as long as the party themselves don't ever say anything. So, but you have to let it breathe. That's all. Just let it breathe. Show them the possibilities. Show them hints at this, and they may even act on that and pivot and cause different outcomes. The robbery happens when it's just like, "Oops, that's not what I wanted to happen. Erase. Okay. Here's an NPC that knows exactly the deal. So don't worry about it anymore."
I think this is like, those are the answers to this specific problem. But we mentioned at the beginning that I think the DM kind of created this problem for himself. In, you never want to, as you're planning as a dungeon master, you don't want to go, "Okay, we're going to go do this, and then once they finish that, this will happen leading to this." As soon as you say, "This will happen," you fucked up. Like, you have to, of course, if you know your party, you can try and prepare in your best guess of where they're going to go, and perhaps 75% of the time you're right, or at least close. But you also have to be very much willing to go, "Oh yeah, here's this little quest or combat or encounter or NPC that I've prepared. They're not going that direction. In the trash." Well, not in the trash. You can recycle it. All that advice we've gone over a bunch.
Bin,
Yeah. But you want to let the party tell the story as much as they can, and then facilitate everything going on around them in a believable manner. Like, that's generally how you want to approach these things. So to kind of show the other side of how we could have averted this problem. Yeah, averted? Yeah. Subverted? Averted. Is when he was prepping, they get this magical item, they know there's more about it, there's this other organization that's interested in it. Let's see what happens. Does the other organization figure it out? Do the party drop the ball and, showcase this thing that they own? Does the party leave it behind? Because that's probably also something they could have reasonably done. It's not out of the ordinary for a player to go, "Oh, this is above my pay grade, not touching that shit." So you should be prepared for all those different outcomes. And again, you don't have to have like 7 different novels written out, but you should have a loose idea of how to answer at least, 5 or 6 different outcomes of any given situation. So that would be my way of getting rid of this problem before it even began.
this might belong in its own episode sometime, but if as the DM you want to plot, if you find yourself wanting to plan, the two ways that I think that you get away with that are first, think in terms of if then. If this happens, then that will happen. If this gets stolen, then that character will chase. And only go like one layer deep. Don't do nested if then. Just one layer of if then statements. And if you really, really just want to try something long term, then instead of writing a plot or planning a plot, just know and understand the characters. Don't write a plot, write a character. And then if you understand that NPC really well, then you can play them. Like, instead of thinking yourself as a writer, don't think of yourself as the creator of the story. Just think of yourself as the player for every other character. And the party don't get to write their story exactly the way they want. So if you start putting yourself in those shoes of like, well, I'm all the NPCs player, and I know them well enough to know how they would react, then you don't really have to plan. You don't have to worry about it because you know what would happen in any, in an infinite number of situations.
Well, yeah,
Does that make sense?
No, I was gonna double down on it.
Yeah, man, you're playing everybody.
I think
you're the universe, man.
The way that I would kind of condense that in my words is, it matters so much more knowing how your organization's NPC's world would react to a scenario versus what their next step is, right? Like, it's more important to know how the evil faction functions versus what the evil faction's step-by-step plan is, if that makes sense. That's kind of how I visualize it in my head, and then just apply that to everyone they interact with. Like, you don't want to have an NPC that's attached to the party and say, well, they're going to do this and then that, because who knows if they get the chance. But if you have a good grasp on their personality and how they would handle themselves, then you can try and steer towards those things or react to surprises a lot easier and more naturally. And that would be a lot more beneficial than having this long timeline written out.
Well, I think we got a lot of juice out of that. I think we covered that pretty thoroughly.
Yeah, it's a little old. It has a lot of upvotes. I haven't even gone through the comments of what other people's answers were because I wanted mine to be pretty natural. But
same thing.
Yeah, the last thing I'll throw out there is, I think a lot of the times DMs know the answer to their problem, but they are attached to whatever world or quest or NPC or item that they've crafted, and they don't want to let go of it, but they know that they have to. And that's just something you gotta kind of get used to if you're going to be a DM long term. So
I think it's a lesson that as a DM you're going to learn over and over and over again, and relearn and have to remind yourself. And it's probably one of the toughest things about it, because there are a lot fewer barriers for a player to get attached to his or her character than there are for a DM to get attached to any particular character.
Mm-hmm.
So I think also when they talk about the DM being a fan of the player's characters, I think of that not only as advice for how to run the game, but also for how to enjoy the game.
Mm-hmm.
If the player's characters are some of your favorite characters, then you'll be more satisfied.
Yeah,
which is why it's important to have expectations that you set for the players so that they don't bring crappy characters.
Yep, very sound advice. But I think that about does us here, sir. Any closing thoughts? Any e-begging that we need to get out of the way?
Write your questions or your scenarios in the comments. And like and subscribe. And I promise, if you write a comment, you're going to get a response, probably on video at this point. That's one of the great things about getting in on the ground floor. And if you're watching this, that's where you are. So give it to us.
Why do I feel like I'm signing up for an MLM right now?
We're our product. You've already received our product if you're at this point in the video, so you can't get ripped off.
Yeah. And if you send this video to 3 friends, then you become a verified, certified, monthly awarded member.
We'll send you a natural 2 coffee cup. No, we won't. But someday we're gonna have merch.
Yeah.
Actually, would like to have a new coffee cup.
We'll make merch just to get James a new coffee cup. It is confirmed.
For us, we'll just make merch for ourselves. Nobody else can have it.
But anyway, to cease our rambling, I appreciate you all watching the video, and I guess we will catch you all later.
Till next time.